Great. Welcome, everyone. I'm happy to have you here. We're going to have hopefully a really good discussion day. Alex, do you want to start with the land acknowledgement?
Yes.
Give you change.
Land acknowledgement. The King County Continuum of Care Board acknowledges that we work on the unceded traditional lands of the Coast Salish peoples, especially the first peoples of Seattle, the Duwamish people, the original stewards of the land, past and present. We honor with gratitude the land itself and the Duwamish tribe. This acknowledgement only becomes meaningful when combined with accountable relationships and informed action, and this is the first step in honoring the land that we today sit on and their peoples.
Thank you. And would you like to do the theory of change?
Yeah. If we create a homeless response system that centers people who have lived experience of homelessness, then we will be able to meet needs and eliminate inequalities in order to end homelessness for all.
Thank you. Thanks for doing both of those. Very important to our work. And I think we'll do roll call next.
Okay, please stay here if you're here. Devin Koenig Cease.
Here.
Noah Fay.
Here.
Eddie Matlock Mahone.
Here.
Martha Linder.
Here.
Portia Anderson. Patricia Sam. Elliot Hart.
Here.
Antoinette Lambert. Kelsey Beckmeyer.
Here.
Jaja Floyd.
Why not?
Here.
Kenyatta Carol Hillman.
I'm here.
And Sherry Tillman. Okay, with 8 members present, quorum is met.
Fantastic. Thanks, Alex. Great. So what we have on our agenda today is really to talk about prioritization. I know this was a topic that was brought up kind of last month. But before we dive into that, I just want to say, hopefully you all saw my email. The COC board did approve the changes to our CE policy and procedures. So that's really exciting. They also approved the HMIS Data Quality Improvement Plan, which was developed by the Systems Performance Committee. And so both of those are being updated. Our manual is already on the website. We've also reached out to our partners to let them know of the changes, and we'll be doing more communication around that over the next several months, just so that we're continuously updating and making sure that folks know. So thank you all for your hard work and for reviewing that. We can always revisit more changes. I think things are fluid, but we made very significant impact with our policies and procedures, and I just want to thank you for that. So today we're going to talk about the prioritization that was really proposed in November of last year. Alex sent it out in the packet. I just want to make sure that it came to you all and you had a moment to refresh on that. But really looking at that, one of the things that put us on hold the last time in the COC board was really looking at discrimination laws related to housing. And so did some due diligent work there as well as with the state. One of the things that we basically found out is HUD, you can use race and ethnicity, but it cannot be the only factor and should be coupled with other types of vulnerability. So looking at other areas just beyond race and ethnicity, that's one of the key factors. And then with Washington state guidelines, their guidelines actually state that you cannot use data collected in the assessment process to discriminate or prioritize households for housing or services based on a number of things, but what was included in there was race, color, national origin, religion, sex, age, and that kind of went into all of the categories that we had outlined in the previous prioritization, right? Because we were looking at age, race and ethnicity, gender identity, currently pregnant, and fleeing domestic violence. So there were 3 major factors in there. And that's one of the reasons why we wanted to like double, triple check with the state, really important. What I found out is we can move forward with it. The state guidelines are guidelines where our HUD guidance is actually what we need to follow based on our COC. So Washington state guidelines, they are actually going through them right now to revamp them and get them more up to date. So they're actually wanting to learn from us as we work on this prioritization and what we are focused on and how we're going to categorize the vulnerabilities for our community and how we address that in our prioritization. So that's really good to hear that we can use race and ethnicity as a factor as long as it's coupled with other points of vulnerability. So I hope that clarifies a little bit of questions. Definitely wanted to cross our T's and dot our I's. Is there any questions around that, Eddie?
So first of all, yes, that is good to hear. I mean, do we need to, when we're making sure that it's tied with other things, do we need to have a tiering where it's not maybe a primary, something else has to be a primary? And also, since the state doesn't necessarily want us to do it, but it's only guidance, so as long as we're following what HUD is that going to make us, or could that cause us maybe to lose points on applications in the future if we're not following state guidance as well?
It should not have us missing points on the application, and knowing that they're revising theirs right now in learning from the communities, I think that we would be okay because it's really looking at the HUD guidelines. And your first question around other vulnerabilities, I think that's what I want to talk about today because I know in November it was proposed to you and it was briefly talked about. And so I want to kind of have this moment today, and if we need another session around it, of course, to talk about what is vulnerability and for our community, right? So that's really what we should be looking at. So we should be looking at the data as well as qualitative information based on lived experience. So that's what we're going to talk about today, to unpack what was originally proposed. And Patricia,
Perfect.
I think
Thank
you
you.
had your hand up. Yes, of course.
Good morning, everyone. Actually, that was an error. But since I'm on, can I ask a question? And
course.
thank you all for the information you're sharing. And this is regarding training. So I did do the training. And, you know, I work at Disclose and I work at DESC. And I have my HM to get in. So my question is, do I have access? I need clarification. Do I have access to be able to do an assessment with folks in the community? What I've been doing with some of the clients I work with, I've been giving them the resource and calling for them and having them call in to do it. But can I also do an assessment intake? That's what I need, or do I need more training? So I need to know, I really basically am asking for clarification on what's my role and my task is. Yeah.
Yeah, I think we can talk about that offline, Patricia. I'm more than
Okay,
happy to
got you.
discuss your
Thank you.
situation.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, let's connect. Yeah.
Okay, great.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Any other questions? I'm hopeful this is good news. Great. Okay. So I want to bring up the original prioritization that was discussed. Actually, let me do this. Can you all see that?
Yes.
Great. Thanks. Okay. So this was the original prioritization, and it's kind of the tiered way. I'll actually zoom out a little bit. Zooming in, there we go. The tiered way in which we were going to look at prioritizing folks. And one of the things we should consider, and what the HUD guidance as well as what our state guidance was, to really look at like what disparities are we aware of when it comes to prioritization for housing openings. What do we hear from, and or what are people experiencing? Like the folks who are experiencing homelessness, what are their barriers? What are their experiences and perspectives on this? As on the current process. And then we should also be asking kind of what other things should we be looking at that maybe isn't on here? What other data should we be looking at to better understand this? We've had a mirage of data presented over the last few months. We've had an understanding of race and mobility transfers and demographics across like access to prioritization to actual referrals in, and we can revisit that. But as we look at just prioritization, like what other things do we need to understand it? Like, are there, like, should we be looking at what is victimization and what is contributing to long-term homelessness? Is it race? Is it age? Like, we should be looking at these vulnerabilities as opposed to just specifically race or age. Like, I love how this says over 75. That is, does that contribute to more long-term homelessness? Does that contribute to victimization? So we should be contributing it back to vulnerabilities as opposed to saying everyone over 75 obviously has victimization. Well, is that true? What are we looking at to kind of prove that, to understand that a little bit better? And so as we go through this exercise, I would love to hear, we have these prioritizations in front of us: age, race, gender identity. Currently pregnant is the top tier. Second tier is fleeing domestic violence, and third tier is homelessness history, so length of time, right? But how are these the categories, one, that we can codify at the assessment process, and two, how do they relate to vulnerability? And what are we missing here? What are we not thinking about that we could codify, could understand from a victimization standpoint, or overrepresentation, I guess, another one? What else could we be looking at? So I'll start with, based on what you're seeing in front of you with age, race, gender identity, currently pregnant, fleeing, length of homelessness, what else should we be looking at in this, in our prioritization? Noah.
Thanks, Beth. Thanks for pulling this together and sharing this. yeah, I like the direction we're going with one giant caveat. We are missing behavioral health concerns. I think if the, and certainly not just behavioral health, certainly physical health conditions too. And I know historically that's a harder thing to measure than some of this hard and fast data that you've got here on the screen. But a couple things. If we're thinking about who is overrepresented in people who are both vulnerable and experiencing homelessness, feel quite confident people with significant behavioral health issues are going to fall into that category, and we need to capture that. Physical health issues too, and we can talk about like how, as that's a whole nother conversation, how to capture them, and we've done that a ton in this space. And then just also want to highlight that I know service matching is separate from prioritization, but I think the prioritization group needs to reflect the resources in our community that are overwhelmingly designed to meet the needs of people with complex behavioral health issues. Those are the housing resources that are disproportionately available in our community. Certainly at the DSC side of things, they're exclusively the housing resources that are available. And so we should be thinking about that when we do prioritization too. So that to me is a must. That has to be in the top tier.
Great. Thank you, Noah. Other thoughts?
I definitely want to echo what Noah just said. Sorry. I think though, we just need to figure out how to collect that. I mean, I know you guys don't have the access to the integrated dashboards anymore that we had during COVID, where you guys could pull some of that data. And I mean, I always cringe when somebody that is a lower acuity goes into something that is high acuity where the services don't match what they need. Not saying that they don't deserve housing. That is by far not what I'm saying, but it's like we really need to do a better job of service matching. And I mean, even here, yes, like with me taking over all of the referrals, stuff like that, I'm getting a frontline view of how that is not working really well right now. Like we're getting people who are not necessarily good service matches, whether it's a higher acuity property or a lower acuity property, because we do have a range of them. And I mean, people are getting referred to rapid rehousing that really should not be. They really need PSH. I mean, so figuring out how we can do that. And I think that would help us tie in some of these other risk factors, because we can say, yeah, over 75 with X, Y, and Z, they are very vulnerable, or the race and ethnicity, like we can really, I think it would help us tie the vulnerability to the risk factors if we could really get that behavioral health and physical health in there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Martha.
Yeah, just echoing the same in terms of behavioral and physical health. I mean, folks that need medication refrigerated, that need to be able to plug in equipment, that need to have their legs up, that's a real challenge.
Yeah. Joshua.
Yeah, I was going to say, I echo what everyone has said. And I was thinking disability or abilities, right? Because you have people who have wheelchairs, or maybe they're on oxygen and they can't. You got to prioritize people with those kind of, and I think we've already said that personal health needs, you know what I'm saying? But I just find that a lot of people with not just mental health, but ability needs, are going unmet.
Definitely. Devin?
I really appreciate everything. Having, this presentation and all the things that other folks have shared, and just echo that. And I think another factor to consider in prioritization and service match is language and like documentation, immigrant and refugee status, especially just considering how, from my experience, there are limited resources that are focused on serving immigrant and refugee populations in language with staff who are, bilingual, multilingual. Even though I know there are a lot of providers who do a great job of serving them, there are some providers that are really specialized in that. So being able to make sure there's a good service match there, and also prioritization is important. And then that also, I think, relates to the serving folks who are undocumented and the limited resources that we have for those people. So just another thing in addition to everything else, which is really important.
Yeah, these are all super important. So. Kelsey.
Just echoing concurrence with the, I think, really deep need to ensure that behavioral health and physical health are considered prioritization factors based on vulnerabilities. And also uplifting what Devin was stating around immigrant and refugee and documentation status. I do just want to highlight the data sensitivity around documentation status and making sure that we are not doing anything that would inadvertently cause potential harm. Just knowing data sensitivity and importance there. So whether or not is that a vulnerability that is captured within a different area, and thinking around how can that be accounted for while also still maintaining just data sensitivity and data privacy.
Thank you, Kelsey. Patricia, I think you had your hand up.
Echoing, thank you everyone for the awesome feedback and suggestions. I just echoed, I put mine in the chat.
Okay.
And it just says, I agree with what has been said. Thank you.
Thank you.
Regarding the behavioral and physical, you can read it. I'm at work, so if you don't mind reading it, thank you.
Yeah, it says, I agree, severity, behavioral and physical should be included. And Kenyatta says veterans. Can you elaborate a little bit more?
Well, in days I was talking to the on the street, and veterans aren't really housed and worked with as far as programs.
I'm sorry, you're breaking up a bit. Did anyone catch that? Just veterans are on the street.
They're not feeling like they're really being prioritized or have a place as far as placement, prioritization for those guys.
Gotcha. Okay. Thank you. Jaja?
Yeah, Beth, I was wondering if, illness, would that'd be covered under physical health, right? Like if someone was on the streets with cancer or sickle
Yes.
cell anemia or something, that would all fall under the physical health thing. Am I correct?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yes. Yes. Sounds like our major things right now are behavioral health and physical health. I think, those are definitely key elements missing from here. And the vulnerability for folks on the street. Oh, sorry, Sherry, I will let you chime in.
Hello, I would definitely say families with younger children. Like we prioritize and we go 2 and under, but we've been having a high volume of new babies, moms on the street with 2-day-old babies, or 1 week old or 2 weeks old, and also medical fragile. Like we have a situation with a kid that has to have surgery in September, heart failure, and the baby is like 9 months old. So I think that should be added to that as well, and
Mhm.
even being in shelter. And I do have a question that I get is how the nominations, and I don't know if this is the time to answer that, but like it takes a long time for nominations. Can you tell me why for a family be nominated?
For it takes a long time to be connected after a nomination or to make a nomination and hear back.
So yes, after. I'm still learning because my team is which I asked yesterday, but my team we're trying to see how we can be effective by doing the HMIS to put families in since it's taken so long for them to get into shelter, almost like 89 days, 100 days. So we're trying to see if that helps for us to learn HMIS and put families in. And then secondly, we were told that we may need to nominate, but I didn't want to do that process as just doing intake for shelter. So then a question arose is, yeah, how come it takes so long after? I guess I don't even know the process, but I guess all I know is that families are nominated, but I guess it's taken a long time for them to get, I guess maybe a response back or whatever.
Yeah, I think we can talk about the specific situations with your team separately, but
Okay.
essentially in general, the process is your team would be making a nomination for a unit or bed that would become available. And we hold office hours in which you can learn more about either that unit or bed in order to help make an appropriate match with one of your clients to nominate whoever you think would be the best fit.
Okay.
And then from there, the team matches, let's say they had 10 families for one unit, the team would go through and based on prioritization, they would go through that process to say who is the most vulnerable based on our current prioritization model, not the one reflected on the screen right now, but our current model to make that match.
And from my understanding that there's different like different agencies, like it's all determined by that, not just one particular agency when who's deciding who's going into what, right? To that unit that you were mentioning.
Yeah, anyone who is a CE assessor can nominate for a unit.
Okay.
And so we'll take that collective group from any agency anywhere to say, okay, who is the most vulnerable based on our prioritization and get them into that space.
Okay. And do you feel like that's working pretty good? Like,
It has been working good, but we can also, we're looking at it from the process standpoint. And this
okay,
is why we would love to hear, hey, as we talk about prioritization, as we talk about coordinated entry, what are you all experiencing? What are the folks that you are nominating or, what has been your personal experience in this to improve it?
okay. All right. Thank you.
Of course. And we can chat offline about your specific group.
Okay,
Yeah.
thanks.
Yeah. Kelsey.
I'm curious to hear from the rest of the committee, knowing that there is pretty strong consensus around the hope to incorporate behavioral health and physical health and the known challenge of getting access to data, whether or not this committee would want to look at doing a phased approach of prioritization. So moving forward with what has been proposed and what's up before us and was reviewed back in November, and in the interim focusing then on a phase 2 of incorporating then physical and behavioral health data and looking at ways that that can be incorporated with strong information and getting access to that. So just curious to hear from the rest of the committee whether or not that would be an approach others would look at taking.
Thank you, Kelsey. That's a great question. Any thoughts here? So Kelsey, just so I'm capturing it correctly, could we move forward with this type of prioritization that we have in front of us, and then look into the behavioral health and physical health aspects, how we would quantify that, how we would collect that data in the most appropriate HIPAA compliant way without creating harm or vulnerability, or harm, not, sorry, without creating harm, and then incorporate that in maybe another phase of changing our prioritization. Is that what I'm capturing?
Yes, that is correct.
I would be in favor of that. I would just want to call out that I don't want this to just die, like us not to be able to incorporate it, because that would be my fear, is that maybe there would be some roadblock and then we're like, oh, okay, we're just not going to move forward, and that we just don't talk about it again. And there's another priorities come up, that it's something that where like maybe we set some benchmarks around like timelines that maybe we can all come together around, of like, what are the steps that we need to do, like what, okay, so we can all see that there is movement towards that together. That would be my only kind of call out around it, I think.
Mm-hmm. See a lot of head nods on that one. Definitely
just
don't. Go ahead,
Agree
Devin.
with that. Yeah, I absolutely agree. And I think since we've already, this has been reviewed and approved on 2 committees, be good to move forward with it, and with like knowing that we're going to have that second phase and a plan for it.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Great. One other thing I want to share that I just had up today, because I think this is important information if we are moving in that direction, focusing on kind of where our population is with race and ethnicity versus the point in time count versus what we're seeing in coordinated entry. Let's see here, let me share this. Can you all see this? Great. So this was kind of a breakdown of what we're seeing based on our population and point in time in 2024. And then coordinated entry data that we presented kind of over the last couple months that we're covering April to April. So it's not exactly the same exact time frame, but very close in the sense of 2024. And so we're comparing similar apples to apples, and it's a rough estimate, right? And comparing kind of 3 different data points. And when we look at race and ethnicity, when we look at the population, you have your first column, which breaks it down. AIAN is 1% of the population. Asian Americans are 19% of the population, and this is King County. African and African Americans are 6%. Hispanic and Latinx are 10%. Multi-race are 10%. Native Hawaiian Pacific Islander are 1%, and white is 53%. When we look at the point in time count, that's people experiencing homelessness based on our annual count or biannual count. Native Americans, African Americans, multi-race, and Native Hawaiian Pacific Islander are all overrepresented based on the population. I think we know that. Hopefully we know that, but I want to reiterate that here. There's significantly high amounts, especially with American Indian, Alaska Native, and African American. So those are really high compared. And then when we look at coordinated entry, and you'll see a range on here because it's a range between, if you look at the access point to referrals to actual move-in, you know, they kind of shift just a little bit within a few percentage points. So that's kind of why you see a little bit of a range. But again, if you compare it to the point in time count or even the population with AIAN, it is significantly underrepresented. It is higher than the population, but for folks that experiencing homelessness, definitely underrepresented. When you look at Hispanic and Latinx, again, they are underrepresented based on those who are experiencing homelessness. And then we have white, Caucasian, who is underrepresented based on who is experiencing homelessness. And so when we look at the vulnerabilities, what I'm seeing mostly is with AIAN, African American, Hispanic Latinx, multiple race, and Native Hawaiian Pacific Islander. Just based on kind of point in time and coordinated entry representation, that's really where we're seeing significant under and over representation, whether it's in point in time or coordinated entry. And I just want to highlight this because as we talked about the last screen with the prioritization, all of these asterisks right here, AIAN, African American, Hispanic, multi-race, and Native Hawaiian Pacific Islander were going to be elevated within the race and equity. So if you fell into one of those categories or identified by that race, I should say, or ethnicity, that would be prioritized over white and Asian American. That's kind of what it would mean within the realm of the prioritization that we were just looking at. I just wanted to make sure everyone was aware of that before we look again at the prioritization. Okay. Great. Any questions on that? No? I see that my face might be frozen. Oh, okay, there we go.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So Kelsey brought up a great point about do we want to move forward with the prioritization as it's been proposed back in November? And we definitely as a committee do not want to discount the behavioral health and physical health. I think that we can, as a committee, we need to bring that first and foremost to the forefront of our work. We need to look at how we could codify that information. We also would need to look at what disparities we're seeing with folks experiencing behavioral and or physical health within homelessness. And I think that can be the work as we move forward. I would love for this committee to lend the experience. I know that I think Noah left already. He had another meeting, but Noah was talking about how they are kind of gathering that data now. And we want to learn from our providers already doing this work to understand how we could do it as a system, right? So I think this could be a conversation as we move forward to have kind of a space to talk about how we would gather that information, because it's currently not within our scope of work from the coordinated entry side at this time. We don't gather we gather some information, but not all of it, right? And so how do we do that in the most appropriate way? How do we look at that on the assessment side? So we really need to dig into the assessment to understand how we could better capture that data. Yeah, I think it will be the work of this team, and we can walk through maybe the process of how we're doing the assessments now, what is required, what is being captured, and talk about how we could either, work that into HMIS, put it into some other place that is more HIPAA compliant, even though HMIS is HIPAA compliant. But how do we make sure that information is protected? Great. I don't know if we want to start that conversation now or if we want to wait. But Eddie, I noticed you came off mute.
Oh, I was just gonna ask, do you need somebody to actually like make a motion to adopt that formally? Something?
If we want to move forward with this prioritization, we do have quorum today. If we want to make a vote, we weren't counting on a vote this month. But if we
I'm good
do,
with not too, and if we wanted to work on it more to try to figure out how we can work in language around the behavioral health and physical health, I just didn't know what our ultimate outcome goal was for this today.
for today, I think that is up to this committee. We were not expecting a vote. Do we want to give more time to committee members who are not here to have a say? Do we want to move forward with a vote? And we would need a motion for that, or we can revisit it next month with that feedback and have it on the agenda to talk about and to have a vote. And I would recommend that we do it next month to vote on it so that people have more time to process. We can also come back and lay out some parameters for how we're going to dig into the behavioral health and physical health aspect so that we're moving in that trajectory before taking a vote on this.
Yeah, no, I think I would definitely agree, because I think any motion I would want it to make sure to include that this is a phased in approach. Like, this is the first phase, the next phase is going to include this, X, Y, and Z and stuff like that. So I think we definitely need more time to try to formulate that.
Great. We can put that on the agenda for next month. And next month, we're also going to be talking about some of the year-over-year data. So that may help inform as well. Our CI team need a little bit more time. And so we wanted to give them that space to make that happen. And so I think we'll have even more information, and then we can also put on the agenda to talk about the behavioral health and physical health, and focus in on how we're going to do that preliminary plan as well as phase it in. I can bring suggestions, but I would love to hear everyone's feedback at that meeting. Great. Any other questions or topics we want to bring up related to prioritization or access? Because we will be talking about access next month.
I don't know if it kind of would tie to access. I think it would be important for this committee to also just maintain and keep eyes on how the inventory project is going, and how that's kind of affecting positively or negatively, referrals and appropriate placements, and also on the housing provider side, how it's going. So like, is it helping us manage our inventory? Is it causing a whole bunch more workload, things like that?
For sure. We can make that a standing agenda item. And just to update everyone, the committee on the inventory project, we had our blackout dates this past week, Thursday and Friday, where we shut down HMIS for housing providers to ensure that we had the appropriate people within the units. We will need to do another one of those in about a month or so, to ensure that all people are in a unit. So there's still a little bit more work to do, but both the coordinated entry team and our community impact team are continuing TA support through year end. I think we'll have real solid information once we are able to get everyone into those units. Right now, the coordinated entry team, because not everyone is in a unit, we're doing kind of a dual process for the prioritization, match, and referral process. So they're starting to work within the system, within HMIS, and as well as doing it manually. So there is kind of a dual process right now as we make this transition, but we are getting there and working forward. So, but I will say during the blackout period, we were able to complete it within the time frame. There was no delays. So that's really positive, both for the providers as well as the team, working together to be very communicative and get people matched to the right unit. Yeah. So.
Beth, for clarity, the blackout process was to figure out who goes where?
Yeah, so let me explain a little bit more. So housing providers put their buildings and units into HMIS. So all of those categorizations, like, is this a coordinated entry unit? Is this for someone who has ADA? All of those requirements, they went through and did that over the last several months. And during the blackout period, we were making sure that someone who is experiencing homelessness or who is housed in that unit was actually attached to the unit appropriately. It's kind of like a data validation to make sure that we had a one-to-one kind of match in the system. So now we can understand, okay, what units are open within the building based on, do we have 100 units? Are there 100 people in there, or are there 99? Calling the provider, making sure, is it 99? Is it 100? We just want to make sure, right? So we called it a blackout period because we didn't want the housing providers going in to like make changes during that time, because it wouldn't reflect well and it would just kind of move things around. And so we really worked with the providers to make sure that they weren't putting in information at that time, and we could make sure that the people were matched to the units.
Thank you. That makes much more sense now.
Yeah. Yeah. Yes, this will give us that clarity where we're like, how many people are at your building? What unit are they in? So we'll have another one of those, but it was a huge feat to get us this far. So yes. Yeah. Any other questions? I'll make that a standing item so that we can make sure that we're following the progress. Thanks, Eddie.
Thank you.
Good. Wonderful. Well, if there's nothing else, we can move to adjourn this meeting.
I move that we adjourn.
Awesome. Thank you. Any seconds?
I'll second.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you all.
All right. Have a good day, everybody.
You too.
Thank you.
Have a good day.
Have a good day.
Bye.
Enjoy
Bye.
your weekend.
Yes.
You too.
Bye.
Awesome.